Today we set out to explore the highly rated Mystic Seaport Museum, but oh, the places we'd go to visit Dr. Seuss. Would rain wash us out on the Mystic River and have us feeling like a Grinch? Come along and find out.
A little wet today. I think the rain has passed, but even though it's wet, we are going to be at Mystic Seaport Museum, so it's still fitting it's a little wet. Let's dive in.
The rain definitely did not go away, so we spent as much time as we could exploring the indoor exhibits before venturing outside again.
The spineless exhibit provides a glass menagerie of invertebrates, of marine invertebrates, in the Blaschka glass-making tradition. And it's really fascinating to see how they can replicate anemones, sea squirts, jellyfish, sea cucumbers, sea worms, things like that, through glass-making techniques as like a model, so we can see what some of these things would be like and look like. As invertebrates, it would otherwise be difficult to sometimes picture them. And of course, there are preserved specimens here as well. Glass moon jelly and a glass feather star. Really, really intricate and beautiful specimens here. All of these are figureheads that have been on ships. A lot of times we just think of birds, eagles, mermaids, but all of these different figureheads have been put on ships and have been recovered from ships. And they tend to represent what type of ship that they may have been on. This one, for example, the Donald Mackay. According to lore, it was lost at sea, and the crew was upset that the carpenters quickly made a replacement. But this is a kill-clad Scotsman from the ship Donald Mackay, built in Massachusetts by a shipping magnate who named it after himself. So again, sometimes these are just really interesting. And they also have exhibits here on how some of those figureheads were made, the carving of figureheads and billet heads that would go on the masts and on the ships themselves. Really, really interesting. Displays of model ships. Ships that were built here in Mystic, Connecticut. The Charles Mallory and Sons Shipyard, and the Greenman Brothers. Working the 1800s shipping trade. The intricacy in building these models is exquisite. Shipping routes all around the world. Model of the Charles Morgan, which is actually here on site. The history of the Benjamin F. Packard. This entire display shows the changes in cargo shipping and the types of ships needed for them. This is some of the exhibit buildings right outside the initial entrance location at the Mystic Seaport Museum. Here at the meeting house, we'll be going in, you can see a dramatic production. I believe this one that we're going to see is about pirates. Not entirely too sure, but they have an art exhibit in here as well. That starts in just a few minutes, the dramatic production, so I'm not going to record that, obviously. But hopefully the rain dies down a little bit and we can enjoy more of the outside.
The pirate show was fun, but it really does rely heavily on audience member participation and volunteers on stage. The staff went out of their way to make it work, but with small guest numbers, it really did seem to affect the ability to put on a good show. That theme seemed to run throughout our few hours at the Seaport Museum as a whole.
And here we have the Charles W. Morgan, built from New Bedford in 1841, the last of an American whaling fleet. This was a whaling ship that was in service for 80 years, embarking on 37 voyages. The last of its kind, a National Historic Landmark. Still available for people to visit. Heading down below deck on the Charles W. Morgan. This is at 5'7". Yeah, I gotta duck under here. The captain's quarters. The captain can always look up from below deck. The first mate's cabin. Got to duck low. All these beams down in here also pretty low hanging. Just banged my head a little bit on one. Not a whole lot of room on here for a large ship, but for whaling ships, you need to have the appropriate space for your equipment and for working with the blubber and the meat and all of that. I gotta say though, it'd be pretty difficult if you were tall. Forecastle here, and this is where many of the others would have their quarters. Mystic Seaport Museum has a lot of different exhibits about the life of a sea town, with boat shops, whalecraft manufacturers, shipsmiths, cooperage, watches, clock making, sail makers, cords, in addition to ships that you can explore, exhibits on both African and indigenous Native American shipping as well, in addition to exhibits about using the seas as part of the Underground Railroad. So a lot of different things to see, to explore, to think about, things that you really never often think about in your typical historical understanding about shipping villages. So I think if it weren't such a rainy, dreary day, there would be more folks out here. More exhibits might be open, or more demonstrations available to be done. I think it would definitely be worth coming on back for another visit, if our time would permit. But we'll see what else we can do here today before moving along. There also is a boathouse here where you can take out rowboats, sailboats, paddle boats as well. A workshop where they're working on some boats. Get some of these back up and running. A scale model of the entire Mystic River area, and there's narration here as well, telling some stories about life down the river, different types of ships, different styles developed here in Mystic for particular purposes. All in all, I think there's a lot to see and do here at Mystic Seaport Museum. It's just the way that the weather hit with us here today and our timing, and we got to get moving along to the rest of our day. So I think next time we're back up in the area, we'll definitely give this another shot and see how it comes about. For now, we'll move along. See you soon. Here we are in Springfield, Massachusetts. Springfield Museums. 5 museums for the price of one. That includes Natural History Museum, includes Fine Arts Museum. The Amazing World of Dr. Seuss is also here. Ted Geisel, Dr. Seuss, was from Springfield, Massachusetts. So we're going to check this out today. So it looks like the display rooms. The first one that you go in is about young Ted Geisel here in Springfield. And different exhibits, but each one rhymes just as they would in Dr. Seuss' book. The O, the places you'll go elevator. Moose Juice and Goose Juice Brewery. Of course, these are themed to some of the very places in Springfield for where little Ted Geisel recognized and understood. Of course, there's interactive elements for the kids themed to Dr. Seuss works, like One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish, The Cat in the Hat. Little kitchen area. And even help the Lorax clean up the environment. And you can take a ride on Mr. Gump's 7-hump. Do you hear something? Do you? I hear a rumor that Horton hears a who. Back in the day, we would call this a light bright. Super Mario wasn't Dr. Seuss, but someone put the light bright to creative use. Dr. Seuss is more of an exhibit about the man himself. His baby book that his mother, Henrietta Ornetti Seuss Geisel, had developed for him over the years, as well as some furniture and drawings here posted on the wall that he would then sometimes give and make for his own family and loved ones. The museum also houses some personal correspondence that he's had with other family members or friends or fans of his work. And you can see how he would develop interesting nicknames for individuals. Very similar to the quirkiness of his work he maintained with his family. The upstairs section of the museum also has an exhibit on his family. You can't film or take pictures in there. Those are personal correspondence to family, and a very Seussian family tree with some photos of his family. So you can't take photo or video that's in there, as requested by the family, so we're not. But it is, again, it brings humanity to the man of Ted Geisel, of his family and the house that he grew up in, and the like. So, a very interesting, fun place to be, to reminisce about your childhood, your parenting, or whatever your remembrance of the importance of Dr. Seuss is. The amazing world of Dr. Seuss. Outside there's a sculpture garden. We'll go check that out as well. Check out the Museum of Springfield History. The lower level of the Springfield History Museum actually has historical figures in a child's play scenario. So it's neat for the kids to learn about science or history and perform some of the same types of work that they did themselves.
In the 1850s, Springfield became the home of a print shop owner named Milton Bradley, whose biggest work was reproducing prints of a clean-shaven young politician named Abraham Lincoln. When Lincoln began growing out his beard, though, Bradley nearly went broke, but he turned his attention to cards and board games, and the rest became history, immortalized in the Springfield History Museum.
Hasbro Gameland features an assortment of life-size games that you can play, similar to many of the games that we would play when we were a kid. There's a spinner device for board games. But here, it looks like we have a Simon. Actually, it looks like leading out of the Hasbro Gameland, they have a timeline of popular games from 1880 all the way through 2010. Things like Risk and Play-Doh and Mr. Potato Head in the 50s, Barrels of Monkeys from 1965, Scrabble in 1948, Tinker Toys, 1860, the checkered game of life. Instead of today's familiar spinner, the original used a six-sided top. Milton Bradley created the game that launched his career in a Springfield industry in 1860. Never realized that Springfield, Massachusetts was the home for many of the most popular games that we remember when we were kids. Springfield, Massachusetts was also very important in the abolitionist movement leading up to the Civil War. John Brown, originally born in Connecticut, and then moved to Springfield. John Brown, of his raid of Harper's Ferry fame, and we have a video there about Harper's Ferry and John Brown's involvement there as well, so you can check that out. But right over here, we have actual desk used by John Brown while he was a wool merchant here in Springfield between 1846 and 1849. Photo of John Brown right over there. And again, so there's, if you are in the Springfield, Massachusetts area, there's a display here about John Brown's raid on the arsenal in Harper's Ferry. There's an arsenal, the armory here in Springfield. There were two armories that had major caches of weapons. And John Brown raided the one in Harper's Ferry, and the other was here in Springfield. Mass producing weapons. Originally just housing the weapons. From 1795 was a storage arsenal, but then replaced by
a new national armory in 1795, developing or producing most of the nation's military rifles and muskets from 1795 to 1968. So, of course, there's going to be a display here in Smithfield history about the development of firearms leading up to the Civil War and beyond. I'm also not a gun enthusiast. Personally, I feel if I had a gun in my possession, I'd be subject to some type of accident or clumsy thing, so I just personally don't keep them near me. But it is fascinating. The Springfield Revolver Club was founded in 1886, and we have revolvers that may have been used in the Olympics. The American Olympic team in Stockholm. Horace Smith and D.B. Wesson together formed the Smith & Wesson Company, both from the Springfield area. Another section of the museum is all about transportation, so it'll have old Springfield fire and police vehicles and exhibits here as well. Western Massachusetts, and one of the greatest historical transformations of all time, the Industrial Revolution. The Pioneer Valley is apparently what they also would have called this particular area of Western Massachusetts, with numerous types of items being manufactured here by companies here in Springfield. I personally am not an automobile enthusiast, so I couldn't tell you any of the differences or groundbreaking aspects of these different vehicles, but we have Rolls-Royce and a Militaire motorcycle from 1919. Some of these were manufactured in Springfield, others were gifts from folks who had owned them from Springfield. Indian brand motorcycles, early snowmobiles developed here in Springfield, Massachusetts. Just as I'm not an auto enthusiast, definitely don't know much about motorcycles, but any bikers, any old automotive mechanically inclined individuals would love to check out these motorcycles. It was here in Springfield, Massachusetts in 1893, while others were looking to create a horseless carriage. It was here in Springfield that the first horseless carriage was developed and tested. The original Duria. Amongst this section of the development of transportation, you'll find a very nondescript 1985 Cadillac Seville. The Cadillacs obviously were not manufactured here in Springfield, but rather Detroit. But when we look on through, we see a California license plate of Rich. This was the last automobile owned by Theodore Geisel, Dr. Seuss, fitting that it would find its way in the Museum of Springfield History, where Dr. Seuss himself was from. So the 5 museums here with the Springfield Museums, they're fairly small. So we got through the Amazing World of Dr. Seuss and the Springfield History Museum in about an hour and a half. The 5 museums you can get through in the fair portion. But what is not closed until later on during the summer is the sculpture garden, the Dr. Seuss Sculpture Garden, which actually in the Dr. Seuss Museum, the Amazing World of Dr. Seuss, they have a display in there about the development of the sculpture garden with casts and design projects and things along those lines. So we'll check out the sculpture garden here. The Dr. Seuss National Memorial Sculpture Garden opened in 2002, and then the exhibit in the museum right down on the other side of the green over there opened up in 2017. Yertle the Turtle. The sculptures, designed by Dr. Seuss's stepdaughter, have a combination of multiple characters of his most beloved stories all combined together. This sculpture here is called Horton Court. Horton, Sam I Am, Thing 1 and Thing 2. Very fun. Today was definitely one of those days that surprise you on road trips. We had a disappointing washout in Mystic, but Springfield surprised us in both what we saw and what we found that we might want to go back to see. Just one of those reminders that when you hit those holiday roads, you never really know what you're going to get. Thanks for coming along with us, and we'll explore Connecticut some more tomorrow. But here, it looks like we have a Simon. Let's see. Get this to work. Back in the day, we would call this a light bright. Super Mario wasn't Dr. Seuss, but someone put the light bright to creative use.